Well, next up, we have a somewhat interesting movie. We don't cover that many older movies on the show. We haven't done so, at least so far. This is the 1960 The Little Shop of Horrors, which is directed by Roger Corman, who is the big name in horror, if you're familiar with 60s horror. The story is basically this one weak guy who works in like a florist flower shop, has a somewhat unique plant, and he's trying to get the plant to blossom and be strong, but he's not sure what the plant needs. He's tried fertilizers, he's tried all types of things to get the plant to grow, but he's not having any success until he finds out that the plant needs blood to help it grow. And then, because he wants his plant to grow and he wants to keep his job, he attempts to get as much blood as he can for this plant through a lot of small, somewhat comedic misadventures. That's one thing that needs to be made clear, by the way, when talking about this movie. It's very much a comedy horror, and some of the comedy can be pretty goofy, which you might expect from a 60s movie. But yeah, if the movie has one downside, it's some of the over-the-top comedy they did. That said, I actually find this a pretty enjoyable movie. I've seen this one like 5 times or so. I have it on DVD. I've had it on DVD for like 15 years. And so I've seen it quite a few times, and I enjoy it. But before I talk about what a wonderful movie it is, what were your thoughts on this one?
This movie, and also the remake, I've been well aware of these movies existing, but I've never watched them before. And I mean, I've just never, I guess based on what I've seen or what I've heard, it's just something that's never really interested me. But when I saw it on your list of potential movies to talk about, I thought, if there's any time in my life where I'm going to watch this movie, this is probably it. And also the fact that it was one of the few movies that I hadn't already seen that I did have access to, through Amazon Prime. Now, as I was looking on Prime, they actually have 3 different versions. I watched the one that's in color just because I knew that would probably be the most, well, I guess the version that I could potentially enjoy the most.
Yeah, I was going to ask you if you, because I know there's a colorized version of this movie. Now, I've never seen it and I never want to see it, but I know that you are not necessarily the biggest black and white guy, so I sort of wondered if that is what you went for, and you did, so.
Yeah.
Hopefully the color was okay. I have no idea what it looked like when it was colorized.
It seemed good. I'm not sure. I guess one of the other versions was just the original black and white version, but I'm not sure what the third version was. I don't know what that third version contained, but they all seem to have very similar run times, so I just went with the color just because I thought, I'll give it the best chance for me to enjoy. So, I mean, obviously it's quite a classic movie, but for me, my opinion on a movie based on its status in the horror community or in the movie community in general, that kind of just goes out the window. It really doesn't affect me at all. I could be watching Halloween or, some cheap, shitty slasher movie, and I'm going to give them both the exact same chance to entertain me. I mean, this one, the story it's interesting, it's okay, but I mean, the movie, it is like a dark comedy, so, I mean, if I'm looking at it from a horror perspective, there's nothing really scary about it for me. I mean, even if I was a kid watching this movie, like a 7-year-old kid, I don't envision that this would have even scared me back then. So, we can turn it over to the more comical, goofy side of the movie. While there are 1 or 2 kind of scenes that are amusing, it doesn't really succeed on that level for me either. The one scene in the movie that I may actually potentially go back and watch just for that one scene is the one including Jack Nicholson, just because his character is just so zany and such a weirdo. That scene I thought was quite amusing. But other than that, the only other thing that I kind of found enjoyable, I guess, was just the brief moments of Dick Miller seasoning the flowers to eat. Unfortunately, I believe he died earlier this year.
Unfortunately, I believe it's in January of this year, yes.
But yeah, I thought just every now and then him coming into the shop and I don't know if it was salt or pepper or whatever he was putting on the flowers just so he could eat them. That was kind of amusing as well.
It's somewhat interesting I think it's interesting to note that Roger Corman had a movie that came out the year previous to this, in 1959, titled A Bucket of Blood. And the plot's, it's a pretty similar plot, but the star of that movie happens to be Dick Miller. So he has worked with Corman before, so it was nice to see him bring Dick Miller back for this one. And of course, if you don't know, Dick Miller is a pretty famous face in horror and just, I think, movies in general. He was in Gremlins, I believe The Howling, and
Terminator.
Yeah. He's doing, quite a few things. Very famous face, and I really enjoy seeing him in pretty much anything I see him in. And of course, Jack Nicholson, really young Jack Nicholson. I think this is only his maybe fourth movie. So he was his zany character, sort of nice to see. I will say, when it comes to Little Shop of Horrors, I feel like if you're not the biggest fan of comedies, I would probably recommend you stay away from this one, because like I said, some of the stuff is somewhat goofy. I can deal with a lot of it. I'm not a big fan of goofy comedy, but given that this is from the 60s, I was okay with it. But there were a few scenes that went over the top, like the whole when you're sort of mind controlled by the plant toward the end of the movie. I mean, it was sort of funny, but then it just went on for a bit long, and I don't know how much of that I needed.
Mm. And I mean, when I was watching this movie, I think I had a bit of a revelation. At least I think I may have pinpointed at least a part of why I don't tend to enjoy older movies. The movie we just talked about previously, where I was talking about music and how much that affects my enjoyment of a movie. In this one, the music in the movie just sounds like a lot of other, the type of music you'd hear in all these other older movies, and I think it's before a period where music really upped its game in movies, I think. And that's probably another big portion as to why I don't enjoy a lot of these older movies. Just a lot of the music sounds very much the same to a lot of other movies from the time.
Feed me. How did you feel about the voice of the plant, out of interest?
It was okay. It didn't really do much one way or the other for me.
Out of interest, so you said you have not seen the 86 version of this?
No, so but now that we mention that, I think potentially that one may be somewhat enjoyable for me if I decide to give that one a spin.
Yeah, I've not seen that one. I do know it's if I recall, I believe it's a musical.
Oh, if it's a musical, then that's probably going to drop points with me. I'm not a huge fan of musicals.
I'm pretty sure the plant has a sound, but I can just hear you shouting.
Oh God.
It might be worth checking out though. This one though, like I said, I've seen this one, quite a few times, and I sort of like how it's sort of rips off Dragnet and other cop shows from the late 50s, early 60s with the first person narration. I thought it was sort of funny. It's not like laugh your ass off funny, but I thought it was sort of funny. And there's a few scenes in here that I think what's the guy's name, Mushnik, the guy who owns the flower store. That guy, pretty much any other time he spoke, it sort of had me cracking up. Because he was quite the exuberant individual. Like when he told the main character, "You don't call me Mr. Mushnik, you can call me Dad." It's a sort of a creepy thing for a boss to be saying to an employee. But I don't know. I really enjoyed that character, and there's even though the main character himself wasn't that interesting, I thought there was enough in this movie to keep my interest going. So I think the movie does quite a few things right. I don't think it's a great movie. And like I said, I've seen it quite a few times, and I'd probably give this around an average rating, which for me is a 7 out of 10.
Yeah, I'm going to give it a 3. Yeah, I have no desire to watch it again.
Now, the interesting thing is, if you had seen this in black and white, would that have gone down to a 2 or a 1?
I don't think it would have affected the score, actually. I have a feeling it still would have been a 3, unfortunately. And like I was saying earlier, the only scene that I would care to see again is Jack Nicholson's scene, just because I thought that was really enjoyable. But I don't need to watch a whole movie again just to see that scene. I'll just watch that scene on YouTube and never watch the movie again. Mm. And like I said, Dick Miller eating the flowers, that was amusing, but that's not something I'm going back to watch again. Now, with that being said, if this movie... I mean, hypothetically, if the last 50 years of cinema did not exist, this would probably be a pretty decent movie for me. You know, if anything from the 70s and beyond didn't exist, yeah, this might be something I would say is really good, but unfortunately, we are where we are, and it gets a 3 from me.